Order. I will call Sorcha Eastwood to move the motion, and I will then call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention for 30-minute debates. Order, order. Sorcha Eastwood to move the motion.
Thank you, Chair, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. Today I will present 3 key points. I will show you that Northern Ireland's governance is structurally ineffective and how it keeps us trapped in cycles of instability and dysfunction. I will outline the modest, straightforward solutions to reform our institutions and unlock Northern Ireland's potential. Why it must be the UK Government who acts, and that action must be taken urgently. Devolution, as we know it, began in Northern Ireland over 25 years ago in its most recent form. Since then, Stormont has been without a functioning government for almost 40% of its lifespan. Almost 40%. I'm not good at maths, but that's nearly half. This is not a new phenomenon. Since its inception, Stormont has been held to ransom multiple times. Prolonged collapses in 2000, 2002, 2007, 2017 to 2020, and most recently in 2022 to 2024. These collapses have left our institutions in a cycle of dysfunction and our public services and finances in a state of decay. You may be questioning whether my debate today undermines the Good Friday Agreement. This could not be further from the truth. I wholeheartedly support the Good Friday Agreement and endorse its underlying principles, values and interlocking relationships. I will not. I would like to make progress. It is actually in the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement that I campaign for reform of our governance. The Good Friday Agreement must be understood as it was intended, as a foundation for future progress, integration and normalisation, rather than a permanent solution to the divided society that we had back in 1998. As far back as 1999, my party, Alliance, wrote of the inherent risks in embedding rigid consociationalism within our political structures. We have always been pragmatic about the need for our political structures to evolve. More than 25 years later, the political structures born out of the Good Friday Agreement and subsequent agreements no longer reflect the diversity and progress of our society. I'd like to make a wee bit of progress, Robin. Today, close to 40% of the population hold a national identity that is not exclusively British or Irish, while the proportion of MLAs designating as neither unionist nor nationalist in the Assembly has more than doubled since 2011. The days of defining Northern Ireland's politics in purely binary terms is over. I, indeed, am proof of that. Yet our power-sharing arrangements continue to do so at the expense of stability and progress. There is also this misconception that reform of the Good Friday Agreement would be an unprecedented departure from our peace agreement. Again, this is untrue. For example, the changes made during the St Andrews Agreement in 2006 on how the executive operated were a significant departure from the Good Friday Agreement and increased both instability and the unfettered power of the 2 largest parties to the detriment of good government. The proposals I will outline shortly would in fact move us closer to the original proposal of the Good Friday Agreement provisions. Although we have had an executive in place for the past year, the truth is our institutions today are no more stable than the day in which they collapsed. It is my firm view that it's not a matter of if Stormont collapses, but when. Over the last 12 months, any number of the events that have unfolded politically could have triggered a collapse, and the risk of that is never far from my mind or that of my constituents in Lagan Valley. And most of all, its constant looming threat is preventing the transformative, bold action necessary to get Northern Ireland's public services and finances in order. This will remain the case for as long as our power-sharing structures grant individual parties the ability to veto the functioning of government. But who bears the brunt of this ransom politics and perpetual cycle? The people of Northern Ireland, whether they are unionist, nationalist, or neither of those things like myself. For decades, our communities have yearned and fought for progress, only to be shackled by a system that is fundamentally flawed, a system that allows one party to veto progress, as and when they please, leaving the people and public services of Northern Ireland in limbo and decay. The outworkings of this system have been immensely damaging. As many of you will be aware, Northern Ireland has by far the highest health waiting lists in the UK. Our schools are underfunded, our roads are in disrepair, and our public services are stretched to breaking point. At the same time, our talented young people are leaving for opportunities elsewhere because they see no future in a system that continually fails them. And indeed, I thought to myself today, am I going to mention the fact that we have some of the longest waiting lists? Am I going to mention the fact that our public services are under pressure? Because I'm in this building with colleagues from right across the UK, and indeed we are part of the UK, and they also have the same issues. I guess the only outlier is that we have the biggest spend per head in the UK on health, and yet we have the worst outcomes. Do not tell me. Yes, I'll give way, Robin.
I thank the member for giving way briefly. Just in regards to the fact that she raised there in regards to the biggest spend, well, she also reflected the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council in its recent publication actually equated the spend in Northern Ireland to the North East England and the North West of England. So that specific fact is incorrect, that we have the highest spend. What we have is the challenges of the dysfunctionality of a single-year budget to support our health service from 2016 year on year, which doesn't allow the transformation that health needs.
I thank the member for his intervention. I'm not sure of the provenance. It's one of those lines, and you as the former Health Minister of the North will be aware of the intricacies, but I think the member has made a point that's well made, which is the fact that there are structural issues within Northern Ireland. And I would simply make the point, do not tell me that the issues we have in Northern Ireland in relation to health are not linked to the fact that we can't manage to have government long enough to embed a long-term system of public transformation, which is exactly what we need. For years, Alliance has championed practical, achievable reforms to restore stability, hope and trust in Northern Ireland's governance. First, we must change the way we nominate the First and Deputy First Ministers. Currently, this process allows for one party to block the formation of an executive, holding the entire system hostage. And indeed, whenever I was first elected to the Northern Ireland Assembly, I sat in my seat on more than one occasion, and we voted across that chamber to elect a speaker. However, due to the rules of the game, we went away time and time again over a period of nearly close to 3 years where we couldn't actually form a government. Reforming this process would ensure that no single party can veto democracy. We also need to replace the outdated system of parallel consent. This entrenches division rather than promoting collaboration. Instead, we should adopt mechanisms that reflect the diversity of our society and encourage cross-community support. The petition of concern is another area crying out for reform. Originally designed to protect minority rights, it has been weaponised to block progressive legislation time and again. This tool has not been used to protect. I will want to make progress at this time. This tool has been used not to protect, but to prevent. It's time to reclaim it for its intended purpose. These proposals are modest and should not be controversial. They do not alter the fundamental principles of the Good Friday Agreement. These reforms are not about party politics. They are about people. And I am sure that every single member in this House that represents Northern Ireland and every single member in the Northern Ireland Assembly wants to put their constituents first, does not want to ensure that we have a system that they go without government. How, in all good conscience, could they support such an action? Finally, I turn to why Westminster must act. Some may argue that reforming Northern Ireland's institutions should be left to the local parties. But let's be honest, that ship has sailed. The Secretary of State's reliance on consensus has stalled progress, and it's the people of Northern Ireland who are paying the price. And indeed, it is the people of Northern Ireland, whether they are unionist, nationalist or other, that constantly say, regardless of their dearly held political beliefs, that they don't believe that it's playing fair to have one player walk off the pitch and therefore deny people government of the very basic level. The UK government is the co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement. The UK Government has both a legal and moral duty to ensure effective governance in Northern Ireland, and there is a precedent for this. In the past, where consensus has been unachievable because of our institutional framework, the UK Government has stepped in. From Irish language rights, marriage equality, organ donation and reproductive rights, consecutive UK governments have stepped up to the plate to ensure the people of Northern Ireland, a constituent part of the UK, aren't held back by our institutional failure. Westminster acted because it was simply the right thing to do in implementing what I would regard which have been long-held, settled matters across the rest of the United Kingdom. This reform isn't just in Northern Ireland's interests, it's in all our interests. A stable Northern Ireland reduces treasury costs, boosts economic growth across the UK. Many MPs in this House have rightly questioned, which indeed the member for Southampton mentioned. That was your old life. There's another new member for Northampton here. And what do we have to show for it? This outcome is directly related to our inability to plan and budget long term and take the brave action necessary to reform our public services. I would just simply say, in closing, yes, I'll give way.
And, I'm grateful to her for her speech, and I'm enjoying listening to it, as I suspect many other colleagues are. She's touched on the important role that Westminster can play, and of course that is true. This is the Parliament of the United Kingdom. But I wonder what more she thinks the Northern Irish political parties could do, because of course the whole premise, point and substance of devolution is ensuring that local people can dictate what their communities and their future looks like. So I wonder if she can touch on, before she concludes, what more the political parties in Northern Ireland can do.
I thank the member for his intervention, and I would simply state that time and time again we hear from people right across Northern Ireland, as I've already referenced, whether they're unionist, nationalist or other, that they do not want this system of collapse to be permanently baked in. I would simply just say in conclusion, we took a job when we stood for election to represent our constituents. I'm going to make progress, Jim. We took up these jobs, all of us in this House, regardless of our political opinion, to do what is right for people. I don't want to think that there are people of various different political persuasions than I am that would think that it was the right thing to do to deny people government. I also want to say that I don't regard myself as better than anybody else because I don't designate as a unionist or a nationalist. Indeed, sometimes as time goes on, I have sympathy for a unionist perspective, I have sympathy for a nationalist perspective. Both of those traditions are a huge part of my life. My family is drawn from right across Northern Ireland, and nobody can tell me that a unionist is lesser than a nationalist, or a nationalist is lesser than a unionist. But the system that we have inbuilt a bias towards people like myself that are drawn from right across the community and said, you are lesser than. Your vote does not count the same as that of a unionist or a nationalist. And whilst that may have been the predominant viewpoint at the time in which the Good Friday Agreement was signed, that isn't the Northern Ireland we live in today. This isn't about people saying, we are better than you because we don't involve ourselves in a debate. That's absolutely not what we are about. What we are about is making sure that actually the Northern Ireland that we live in today, that is made up of minorities. There is no one majority view. And I think others would do well to consider that viewpoint. And if that is the situation, then every single political viewpoint must be regarded as equal, not just because it makes my party up to a level that it should be at, but because it is simply unconscionable to have a system that collapses time and time and time again, and then turn around and ask why our public services, why our economy and everything else is not working. What else would you expect me to say? I'm standing here because this is what the people of Lagan Valley want me to ask and want me to say. And I would simply say to the Minister today, these are modest proposals. These are not against the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement. I would say that these bolster the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement. And surely to goodness, that is the legacy people of my generation and new generation were promised. Let us now get on and deliver. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the effectiveness of Northern Ireland's political institutions. Minister Fleur Anderson.
Thank you, Mr Weston. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship this morning. May I begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for Lagan Valley on securing this important debate. I believe it's her first debate since her election, and on the constructive and sensitive approach in which it's been held. She brings an important contribution to this debate. Since her arrival in July, the Honourable Member has already demonstrated her passion for this issue and her enthusiasm in making the case for potential evolution of the Northern Ireland institutions in the future. And I do agree with her that stable political institutions and a devolution settlement that works for all the people of Northern Ireland remain a priority for this government, and I'm sure for all in the hall today. Certainly.
The Minister of State for Northern Ireland. I think it's important we put on record that as a unionist, and all of us as unionists in the backbench here today are committed to finding a way forward that politically can bring us all together. But does the Minister of State agree that there can be no effectiveness of the institutions when hampered by EU interference, with no representation, and that effective devolution will only take place when we are able to make those devolved decisions in the best interests of Northern Ireland and not in the interests of the EU?
I thank the Honourable Member for his contribution and his shared commitment to finding a way forward, because I think that's what everyone in Northern Ireland wants to see. It's the Windsor Framework that enables the UK internal market to be protected post-Brexit and has established powerful democratic safeguards for the Northern Ireland Assembly, and they are what should be used to enable the institutions to function effectively, to enable those institutions to work effectively for the people of Northern Ireland. And that's what I'm going to outline in my speech. But what do we mean by effectiveness? In Northern Ireland, the key... I will.
Mr. talks about the Windsor Framework protecting democratic standards. Surely, when the Windsor Framework surrenders over 300 areas of law where the decisions should be made either in this House or in the devolved Assembly at Stormont, it is the very antithesis of democracy, because it submits Northern Ireland citizens to laws they don't make and can't change, laws made by a foreign parliament rather than their own parliament or assembly. How does that even begin to be democratic?
We've debated at length the pros and cons of the Windsor Framework, and I know we have different opinions on this. And the Windsor Framework does enable that smooth flow of the internal market to work, the smooth flow of goods, at the same time as allowing democratic institution, the Assembly, to have their say and to have those democratic safeguards, as has been demonstrated recently. So I think we need to establish what we mean by the effectiveness of the political institutions. And in Northern Ireland, the key measure of effectiveness in the institutions is peace. The Good Friday Agreement remains an unparalleled achievement for Northern Ireland. Almost 27 years on from its signing, it's brought an end to armed conflict in Northern Ireland and established and enabled a generation to grow up in relative peace, increasing prosperity and allowing the people of Northern Ireland to take steps towards reconciliation. The journey to the signing of that agreement required incredible political courage and imagination from the Northern Ireland parties. They were required to set aside their deeply felt differences and commit to working together in a new suite of institutions in the hope of a better tomorrow. And as we stand here in 2025, I recognise that the same commitment to collaboration and to helping Northern Ireland achieve its full potential is among the parties and is witnessed here today and remains very strongly in the Northern Ireland public. And I'm delighted that the Strand 1 institutions, which the member for Lagan Valley has focused on, the Northern Ireland Assembly and Executive, are fully operational again, having been restored nearly a year ago now in February 2024. I'm extremely grateful that in full operation they're doing what they were established to do, to enable power to be shared between communities in Northern Ireland. It's through devolved government that decisions can be taken locally on the issues that matter most to the people of Northern Ireland. More fundamentally, yes, certainly.
way. Just on the issue of the stability of the institutions, which agree with me that there used to be a complaint about the use of the petition of concern, it was alluded to by the mover of the motion, that hasn't been utilised at all in the past year since Stormont returned. And really the only way we can proceed is when there's agreement between the divided communities in Northern Ireland, and that has to be the basis on which we proceed.
Minister.
I welcome the honourable member's intervention and the recognition as well that there was stability for 10 years at which power sharing was enabled, and that is at the heart of what must be enabled by the institutions there. And unless there is a real change and shown in various different ways, we need to make sure that those institutions maintain that power sharing. And that's what has worked. That's what worked to give us peace up to now. The instability has been in question up to now, obviously, and so that's why it's good to have these debates as we are today. I would.
I'm grateful to the Minister today for giving way, and I echo very much her points of the commitment of this government and these benches to supporting the people of Northern Ireland. I wonder if she touches on the Executive Office and its functions and stability, if she will give us her view on the merits of redesignating the offices of Deputy First and First Minister as joint First Ministers, and whether she thinks that would help assist in bringing communities together.
Minister.
Well, you need consensus for change, and I do welcome the proposals for change that were laid out by the member for Lagan Valley today. And everything that I can see from the political parties and the debates in Stormont is that we are still a long way for agreeing what those kind of changes would be, the specific ones mentioned by the member and others. If anything, what we need now is to focus on delivering for public services, which were outlined also by the member for Lagan Valley. So that if a measure of effectiveness is stability. It's clear that the institutions have not always proven as stable as the people of Northern Ireland have a right to expect. There has been a period of 10 years of stability from 2007 to 17, which shows that it can be done. So the question now is, can these institutions now deliver for what they need to deliver on, or do they have to have a change? That's the question posed by the member for Lagan Valley. They have been inoperable for 40% of their existence, which has shaken the Northern Irish public's faith in the institutions and has detrimental consequences for the delivery of public services. But despite these challenges, the people in Northern Ireland agree that power sharing remains the best basis for government in Northern Ireland. And I recognise that that power sharing is challenging, but the UK government is committed to upholding the Good Friday Agreement in letter and in spirit, and a positive and active partnership with the executive. Now, I'll be making some progress now. This partnership approach enables us to work together to overcome joint challenges and to strengthen the institutions through delivery. I will be making progress now. One of the most important contributions that we as the UK government can make is to provide that long-term certainty and stability to Northern Ireland after the tumult of recent years. It's the focus of the UK government and, I'm sure, of all the members here present. We do not want Stormont to fall into a pattern of collapse, as we've seen previously. And I know that the honourable member feels strongly about the political evolution of those institutions, as do many in Northern Ireland. I remain committed to listening to those conversations going forward and to listening to all of the views of MPs and MLAs. But the priority must be to support the executive to deliver on those most pressing public service issues: health, jobs, the cost of living and education. So here's the third measure of the effectiveness, and that is delivery. Although the Strand 1 institutions have been a significant success, there remains more to be done to ensure that Northern Ireland is the thriving and successful place that we know it can be. Northern Ireland has much to be proud of, benefiting from increasing economic prosperity and investment since 1998, both from the UK government and the private sector too. Northern Ireland has a thriving tourism, film, TV production and cyber security sectors, which are a leading dimension of Northern Ireland's diverse economy. However, from my conversations with many people in Northern Ireland, there remains a palpable frustration at the state of the public services, which the member for Lagan Valley has outlined. I'm very aware that receiving medical treatment in the corridor or waiting more than 12 hours in one of the hospitals across Northern Ireland has become normal. That some children with special educational needs wait for more than a year for the educational support they're entitled to. That social housing waiting lists are increasing, and court delays remain a challenge, with a significant difference between court delays in the rest of the United Kingdom and in Northern Ireland. I do not highlight these examples to be critical, and I know from my many conversations with Northern Ireland ministers that they are fully aware of these challenges and are serious about addressing them. Improving public services is rightly the responsibility of the executive. So the key question is, can these current institutions in their current form deliver on public services? And the answer is yes, they can. The executive has the political will and stability now. A record funding settlement of £18 billion for Northern Ireland in 2025 to 26, which is an increase of £1.5 billion. Funding for the Northern Ireland Executive in the autumn budget exceeds 124% of comparable UK government funding per person in the rest of the UK. And the Executive has all the levers it needed to tackle these challenges. The UK Government is focused on delivering our 5 missions across the UK and is a willing partner with the Executive in this and wants to help the Executive to seize this opportunity. We are committed to working collaboratively and ensuring that Northern Ireland's institutions can work effectively to deliver for the people of Northern Ireland.
And I raised it with the Minister in any questions, was the £234 million transformation fund which the Government has given. And I know the Minister and I agree that it's crucial that we get that transformational monies released to the Executive and actually spent in Northern Ireland to transform those services as soon as possible.
I'm glad the member for South Antrim has raised this issue. There is a £235 million part of the restoration package focused on transformation, and it's transformation that can demonstrate the effectiveness of the institutions. And this is a demonstration of the UK Government's willing to work together in partnership for genuine transformation. I know that these projects will be agreed by the Minister for Finance very shortly, and I agree also that this needs to be done quickly. As the Honourable Member knows, transformation takes time. There needs to be a collaboration and also a willingness and a political will. And I think we have this with the Executive right now. So in conclusion, Northern Ireland's political institutions arising from the Good Friday Agreement have been extremely effective in embedding and upholding peace. They have enabled locally accountable decision-making and brought increasing prosperity to Northern Ireland since the signing of the agreement in 1998. The Honourable Member has outlined the challenges and frustrations felt by many in Northern Ireland, and we are politicians in challenging times. The focus of government policy in Northern Ireland remains securing a brighter future for generations to come. The UK Government remains committed to working with the Executive in a spirit of collaboration and partnership, not seen with the previous government, to support the transformation of public services and ensure the institution's long-term effectiveness, to deliver on those issues that every member in the hall today will agree that matter most to people in Northern Ireland: economic growth and the cost of living, safety, jobs, education and health. And I thank the Honourable Member for bringing her contribution to this debate, an ongoing debate that needs to happen all the time about reform of the institutions. Thank you very much indeed, Chair.
The question is that this House has considered the effectiveness of Northern Ireland's political institutions. As many are of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is now suspended until 2:30 p.m.